Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be joining you today. My name is Dipti Pratt. I am the co-leader for the Tonic Book Club with my colleague and Tonic member Tony Stainer. We are in for a complete treat today. Tony and I started this book club a couple years ago. I was an English undergrad, so when someone said, let's do a book club, I'm like, pick me, pick me. So we have had the opportunity to go through a variety of books, but today are really thrilled to be in conversation with Gabe Brown on Dirt to Soil and really talking through Regen Ag. The conversation is going to be an opportunity to really be interactive. We're going to get a chance to hear from Gaudi, who actually brought us Gabe, and for the chance to hear from Ryland and all these leaders in the ecosystem to hear more. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Dipti Pratt. I'm based in the Bay Area. I'm the Managing Director of Global Membership and Lead Americas for Tonic and have been here for about 5 years. 30-second overview of Tonic. Tonic is a global community of impact investors. We show up for individuals in two ways. One, really to help them on their journey of impact investing, and two, to help the field. So if you don't know more about Tonic, happy to share more, but really wanting to turn and have the conversation very much be about Gabe. And so with that, Gaudi, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, hello. My name is Gabe Kenny. I'm an impact investor, a member of Tonic community of impact investors, from where I learned about regenerative agriculture. So I'm now in a course on regenerative agriculture in southern Spain on a beautiful farm. I'll show you a glimpse of it. It's really amazing here. And it's a very dry area. We came here because it's also because it's a dry area, very similar to conditions in Israel. So I will be very short and say that I'm very, very excited to be on the same call with Gabe Brown and with Ryland. Thank you, Ryland, for introducing Gabe. And it's really an honor. And we are all here. And what I'm trying to do also globally is to connect people so we learn faster how to move to regenerative systems in agriculture and food systems in general. What I'm finding is that there's a lot of gap of information. Some people know a lot. Some people are just in the beginning of their journey. And by connecting people and allowing people to learn from the best, we move faster as a community, globally and regionally. And we have here Alfonso, you're online. Alfonso, he's there. He's gonna present a little bit of the farm, about the farm that we're in. Alfonso is the owner of the farm here, many generations. And now they have an academy for teaching regenerative agriculture because they excel in it. And they are studied by the Wageningen University in the Netherlands because they are so excelling in what they do in regenerative agriculture. So in order to ground us to a real farm, let's welcome Alfonso to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Gary. I'm here, in the same room as Gary and many other people. I think we are 20 people here. And this farm is called La Junquera. It's an 1,100 hectares farm in the southeast of Spain with dry conditions, about 300 millimeters of rainfall, 1,000 meters over sea level. And we have a diversity of crops and try to do as many regenerative agriculture practices as possible. I think all of us also, we are big fans of Gabe Brown and his work. And I think when I was starting this, I already followed some of his talks online. So I'm very excited to be in this call as well. And now I have to watch the documentaries that I didn't watch yet and read the book to keep up. But yeah, thanks a lot for inviting us and for organizing this for all of us, Gary.
Cool. So I'll take it and bring it now to Ryland to say a few words and your take about this call, and then we'll move on to Gabe, and Tony will lead the call from there.
Beautiful. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. My name is Ryland Engelhart, and I want to just start by saying thanks, Gaudi, thanks, Tonic community, for making regenerative ag a topic of interest and an idea that you're championing. My personal story is I came through hospitality and restaurants, was connected to food through that. And about 11 years ago, I saw a talk that changed my life, where I could see the connection between soil health, plant health, animal health, and human health, and environmental health all in one conversation. And it was so transformative that I couldn't shake the opportunity. I couldn't believe that there was actually a solution of how we could heal and turn things around on planet Earth, and that everyone who eats could participate in that transformation. And so that led me to founding a little nonprofit in my garage with my friend Finian called Kiss the Ground. And that led to a partnership with the filmmakers Josh and Rebecca DeCal. And that's led to our work really of championing, similar to what Gotti said, how do we have the world accelerate in this direction? And the way that I see best to do that is how do we elevate those practitioners who are best in class and showing the example of what's possible. And so it's a supreme and sublime and such an honor to have Gabe on the call today. And it's been such an honor to give his story and his life and his work so much legs. And yeah, grateful to be here. And thank you all for joining and your interest.
Tony, would you like to start?
Oh, yeah, or we can just invite Gabe. Yeah, perfect. Do we want to invite Gabe into the room now, or into the spotlight, I should say? He's been here for a few minutes. There we go.
All right. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. Ryland, as always, good to see you again. And the book, excuse me, the book kind of outlines my story up until when it was written in 2018. And I got into farming and ranching. I grew up in town. I was not from a farm or ranch. And I'm not going to get too in depth to it, except to say that, 4 years of hail and drought, absolutely devastating to live through, but absolutely the best thing that could ever happen to my family and I, because it propelled us on a journey of learning to work with nature instead of against her. And that is really, all I ever wanted to do was just move cattle. I just wanted to ranch. That's what I am. I call myself a rancher. But I think God blessed me with a big voice and a loud mouth, and I felt I had to use it. And, back when I started down this path after those 4 years of hail and drought, nobody was talking about regenerative agriculture. It wasn't talked in that sense. Like Ryland, I learned about the 4 ecosystem processes: the energy cycle, the water cycle, the nutrient cycle, and community dynamics or biodiversity. Learned about it from Ellen Savory. But what's been developed since then, and this is in no way me alone, it's many, many of us, learn that to really heal the ecosystem and those 4 ecosystem processes, there are 6 principles. And I know in my book, I only mentioned 5 of them. We added another one since then, and that's the principle of context. Those 6 principles drive the 4 ecosystem processes. And I've spent the majority of my time now in helping others because I've seen the difference it's made on our own ranch. And now I have the good fortune, about the time the book was written in 2018, my wife and I transferred ownership of the ranch to our son. And so he's ran the ranch since then. And in 2018, Ray Archuleta, who is a good friend of mine, David Brandt, another good friend, farmer from Ohio, and Dr. Alan Williams, we founded Understanding Ag. And Understanding Ag is a consulting company whose main goal and mission is to help farmers, ranchers, land managers, anyone who will listen really, to move them down the regenerative path, educate. Because we have to realize, I have a couple of college degrees in agriculture. My son has 3 college degrees in agriculture. And nowhere in any of our education were they talking about these principles or these ecosystem processes. And so farmers and ranchers cannot implement what they do not know. I didn't know about this back when I went on this journey. I had to learn every lesson the hard way, usually several times before it finally sunk in. But what we find is if farmers, ranchers, land managers are empowered with knowledge, they will make meaningful change. And we have to educate. So that's what Understanding Ag was founded on. Today, Understanding Ag is owned by Dr. Alan Williams and myself, and we have about 35 members on our team. We're actively consulting on over 34 million acres across North America, England, Ireland, and soon expanding. We'll be in Japan this year also doing some educational events. What that tells me, how does a company grow from 0 to over 34 million acres in about 6 years? There's a real hunger and thirst out there for something different. We call it conventional agriculture, what's dominating the landscape today. I think there's nothing conventional about it. I think regenerative agriculture is really, should be thought of as conventional because it's been around for eons of time. Nowadays, I spend the vast majority of my time, I'm on the road. Since we started Understanding Ag, I've been traveling over 275 days a year. And I spend the majority of my time, how can we influence whole supply chains? So I talk to board of directors, CEOs, heads of sustainability. How do we get the whole supply chain involved to make meaningful change on the landscape? Just last week, for instance, I was over in the UK. I got asked by Waitrose, very large grocer chain, retail chain there, to come and highlight their conference. And they announced last week that by 2035, they want to move their entire supply chain regenerative. That's all producers, fruits, vegetables, proteins, everything, which is that's quite a ambitious goal because they have over 350 stores. They have, over 1,250 farmers, others who are supplying them. So that's exciting to me, things like that. Next week, Doug Peterson, who's here in Western Montana with me, we're going to be putting on a workshop specifically for Sam's Club and Walmart, helping to educate their management team. And I could go on, but this thing is just catching up, gaining traction, gaining steam. And I think it's really exciting to see the amount of interest out there. And the fact, I look at it as regenerative agriculture truly is, it's finding common ground for common good. I think as a society, we can agree on 90+% of the things. Instead, we argue about that 10%. We need to come together and focus, and we need to focus, I think, use regenerative agriculture as a conduit and tool to bring people together. I don't care where your interest lies. Is it in climate change? Is it in, clean water? Is it in quantity of water? Is it in revitalizing rural communities? Is it in profit for farmers and ranchers? Or what's near and dear to me, personal health? Wherever your interest lies, regenerative agriculture can address that, at least to some degree. So when I talk to all these different people and organizations, I first find out where their interest lies. And no matter what, I'm going to spin it back to regenerative agriculture because it all can come together, and we can help society and all of us if we come together and focus on regen ag. Now, so that's one of the things. I also, since 2018, formed a nonprofit, Soil Health Academy, whose mission is to educate anyone who wants to learn as to these principles and processes. And so we have that educational arm, and we put on events and to educate. And then about 3 years ago, it became very apparent to some of us who have been in this space a long time that there was a lot of greenwashing taking place. For instance, I'll use this as an example. I was contacted by an energy supply company who wanted to source regeneratively grown soybeans for their biodiesel plant. And so I put together a proposal on how we'd go out, educate the farmers, and then be able to source regeneratively grown soybeans. And of course, it was going to cost this company some money to educate across that supply chain. And they looked at my proposal and they said, no, if they no-till, they're regenerative. And I said, no, that's far, far from the truth. But that's the type of greenwashing that we're seeing. So we formed a company called Regenified. And yes, that's a made-up word. But Regenified's goal and mission is to verify the good work that farmers and ranchers are doing, truly enhancing the ecosystem, driving those 4 ecosystem processes. And then how do we reward and help those farmers by identifying whatever they're producing, whether it be wheat, grain, fruit, vegetable, protein, doesn't matter, and bringing them together with a supply chain that truly wants to source regeneratively grown and raised products. And that has exploded beyond belief. I would have never thought that it had gained traction as fast as it has. Salar Shimarani is the CEO of Regenified, and he is building a team that is, the goal is we want to educate consumers so they understand. We want to truly measure nutrient density in the products that are being produced, help the supply chain source those products, and then reward farmers and ranchers. And that is exploding. We're now moving millions of acres through this and going to be expanding rapidly. So I said a lot there in a few minutes. Maybe I'll stop and take a breath and can answer any questions if need be.
Well, Gabe, thanks. Thanks for that overview, and thanks again for being here. I should tell you, our Toniic Book Club normally has about 6 to 8 people. So all those comments you're making about the momentum behind this resonate at this moment, with over 40 plus people on this call. And so I think we're all just fascinated, curious, and want to hear from you about this. I thought I knew something about regen ag as an investor in the space, and I'd made a number of investments before, but the book and the movie Kiss the Ground, I haven't seen Common Ground yet, just brought this to life in a way that really allowed me to truly grok what was going on. So thank you. And I'll just say the book is extremely readable. It's not a thriller mystery page turner, but you know what? I would just say it's very, very readable. It's a extremely easy book to get through, and there's just so much in there. And thank you for that gift to the world, and thank you for all you're doing to push this forward on so many fronts. One thing that struck me, and this came out in the movie, was in China, there is an area of land that's as big as Belgium that was converted from brown to green using regenerative soils. Yep. And so the movement goes well beyond ag. for one. And two, I mean, I looked at that and I just thought, like, my God, you know, it's so obvious we need to be doing this for all the reasons you stated. And you could throw in, you know, biodiversity and, you know, a bunch of other stuff too. But it's so obvious, just the right thing for humanity to be doing, especially at this moment. But, you know, I'm just trying to understand the potential of this. I mean, you know, there's this effort in sub-Saharan Africa to, you know, build the green wall. You know, can we literally turn deserts to green? Is this, I mean, you know, so many benefits, but is this really for climate change? You know,
Okay.
is there a limit to this?
Yeah. Excuse me. I had to move positions there a little. So the work you're talking about in China, of course, is the work from John Liu and the work he's done, and it's absolutely fantastic. So I have the good fortune, as I said, I travel extensively. I'm on hundreds of farms, ranches, land parcels all over the world. At Understanding Ag, I talked about the 34 million acres we're actively consulting on. That doesn't include the millions, hundreds of millions of acres that, you know, the movie Kiss the Ground, Common Ground, and has influenced. I tell people this, no matter where I travel, hundreds of thousands of acres all over the world, I have never, ever once stood on a piece of land that was not degraded, including my own. My own farm is still degraded. Can we regenerate it anywhere? Yes, absolutely. I've been in the Chihuahuan Desert of Mexico and seen just desert being turned into an oasis that it's just mind-blowing. And the reason for it is it's the same everywhere. The principles drive the four ecosystem processes. It's all about how do you build a soil aggregate. And, you know, I made this comment to a group yesterday. I could poll 100 farmers and ask them, how do you build an aggregate? And I bet you I wouldn't get 3 correct answers out of 100. But yet that aggregate is just critical for water infiltration. And then that's where the whole biology lives in and on thin films of water in the pore spaces between those aggregates. It's the biology that drives the nutrient cycle, that interaction between plants and all those microorganisms. And then it's the biodiversity of plants, animals, insects that drives a healthy ecosystem, puts these phytonutrient compounds into plants and then animals. And we can do it anywhere. I have been, many say I'm extremely arrogant in that I've made the statement that I can regenerate any land, anywhere in the world, you know, now, with the exception, of course, Arctic, Antarctic, etc. But it's simply these principles. It's not rocket science. I appreciate what you said about my book being simple. That's because I'm a simple man, you know. This isn't anything difficult to do once you understand the principles and processes. That's all it takes is a bit of education. And once we educate, but we have to get consumers demanding it, realize that the current food system we have was driven by consumers with their buying down. So we can't, I often get asked, well, why don't more farmers and ranchers use these practices? Well, consumers need to demand it. Then we change how agriculture works and how land management occurs. It needs to become stewardship rather than just land management. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, Tony, but it really is just a matter of applying this. You know, we have clients, our smallest client is about 1/4 of an acre, you know, pretty small landholder. Our largest client has 2.1 million acres, okay? We have all sizes in between, every facet of production from avocados to nuts to fruits, vegetables, proteins, doesn't matter. It's that doesn't matter. What matters is the soil. And then that's why we added that 6th principle of context. You have to work within your context and your environment, your financial context, your community context, your family context, all has to come into play.
And just going back to the climate change
Mhm.
question, we had just a moment before, but
Yep.
all that
Yeah.
stuff that's in the atmosphere.
Yeah. It really, take my own ranch, for example. When we started, we were between 1.7 and 1.9% organic matter in the soil. Now I had a team there, scientists doing very precise, exact testing of soils. They took over 300 probes down to a 4-foot depth, so over a meter deep. And now we have well aggregated soils 4 feet deep, where before I had 3 inches of A horizon. Now we're over 4 feet, we're able to infiltrate water. Our organic matter levels, the lowest they measured was 5.3, the highest was 11.1. Okay. Historically speaking, soil scientists thought that part of North Dakota was probably around 7% organic matter. So how much carbon can we bring in? Infinite. We can keep building because you grow those soils deeper. The deeper the rooting depth, the more carbon, the more biodiversity, the more carbon you're going to pull in. To me, it's foolish to think that we can't reverse climate change, because what is climate change really? Climate change is the result of degradation of our resources. Mankind's actions is what drove climate change. Now, not all of that's attributed to agriculture, but certainly a part of it is. We've degraded these lands. Take here in the United States, the southwestern part of the United States, now it's a desert. That never used to be a desert. It used to be a lush grassland. The Chihuahuan Desert of Mexico never used to be a desert. It used to be a grassland. Our actions caused that over time. We can certainly reverse it. Non-issue.
Wow. Gotti just sent me a note saying there are more than 60 people on the call, so I understated. The other piece, talking about consumerism, a lot of people today aren't eating beef because of, the grain, the agriculture needed for the grain to feed the beef is driving climate change. Yet grass-fed beef, regenerative, part of this whole regenerative solution, a key part of this whole regenerative solution. And, I think there are different reasons people don't eat beef, but climate is one of the big ones, health and just sort of the moral thing of another, sentient creature. But, I think for those of us who are not eating beef for climate reasons, I think we should be eating regenerative beef. We should be eating grass-fed beef and looking for labels.
Yep. Yeah. Well, as a grass-finished beef producer myself, I'm all for grass-finished beef. Realize the cow today, and I'm using that term loosely, gets demonized, that it's degrading the planet, it's emitting methane. No, it's not the cow, it's the how. Historians believe there was more grazing ruminant animals on the North American continent pre-European settlement than there are animals today on the North American continent, grazing ruminants, okay? The problem is we've removed, so what I'm saying, if methane's a problem today, why wasn't it a problem then, right? Methane isn't the issue because when animals are out grazing, there's methanotrophs and other free-living bacteria that readily consume that methane that a cow emits. So you take that out of the equation. Then they say, well, cows are degrading the planet. Well, when we remove them from the landscape and put them in feedlots, and then we're producing grain, burning copious amounts of fossil fuel to that, trucking that grain to feedlots, it makes no sense. No sense at all. However, interestingly enough, the work of Dr. Peter Bick and the team of scientists just finished a 5-year project where they looked at farms that were using adaptive grazing practices. In other words, they were mimicking what wild animals did, pre-European settlement here in the case of the United States, where they're being moved almost daily. And what they found after 5 years, 4 times greater carbon sequestration than if the animal was just set stocked in a pasture. Okay, 4 times. We don't need less grazing animals on the landscape. We need more, as long as they're being grazed adaptively. And besides that, then you increase the nutrient content of their proteins, milk, eggs in the case of chickens, and it'll provide food that's higher in nutrient density. We just have to change the production model. It's not the cow, it's the how. That's the problem.
I love that. It's not the cow, it's the how. One thing I hear is if everybody adopted regenerative soils principles in regen ag, would we be able to feed the planet?
Okay.
So, yeah.
If I can answer that, if I may. Okay, and I'll use my own farm ranch as an example. So my neighbor grows hard red spring wheat, goes to make bread, right? I grow hard red spring wheat. We can both yield about the same amount, okay? So yield really isn't much of an issue. But for the sake of argument, let's say my neighbor yielded more than me because they're using synthetic fertilizers, etc. I don't use any of that. Say they yield more than me, but then that's all they do. They don't plant a cover crop, okay? They don't run any animals. Well, Gabe plants a cover crop, so I'm capturing more solar energy, providing home and habitat for all the bird species, insects. Then I graze that cover crop and I raise grass-finished beef. Then I graze it with my grass-finished lamb. And then we got bees on the place and we have honey. And then I've got chickens, both broiler chickens and egg-laying chickens. Okay, who's producing more? I'm going to feed the world way before my neighbor does. And I'm going to feed people food that's higher in nutrient density while regenerating the resource. You see, this is such a ridiculous point that we've got to change. If you're truly worried about producing enough food, then obviously go regenerative, because I'll produce way more nutrient dense calories per acre than will my neighbor.
I just want to give a reminder to the audience to put any questions in the chat. We'll try to get to some of them, as many as we can. Gabe, on that, I mean, the other thing that strikes me about that is we look at, something like, regenerate, like the transition to renewables and the energy side and batteries. Mm-hmm. And we're willing to kind of give that sector the benefit of falling costs over time and economies of scale and technology. And I think what you're saying is, like, even today, where we are today, we could do it. And it's only going to get better just because we're going to figure out how to be more efficient. We're going to have scale, tech, the whole thing. And so it's just going to get easier.
It will. And I'm all for those energy saving technologies. That's a good thing. We can grow the exact same crops. We can do it on less, being regenerative. And as these new technologies come in, it'll only make regenerative agriculture even more efficient.
So you brought up your neighbors, and in the breakout sessions, right before they ended, someone asked you, "So Gabe, what are your neighbors thinking?" And it's just a great question.
Yeah, it is. And when you see the film Common Ground, you'll go, boy, I bet his neighbor doesn't like him. Ryland's smiling there because I'll give this teaser to the film Common Ground, which is the sequel to Kiss the Ground. It just so happened while they were filming during that period of time, we had a major windstorm event, 3+ days of 50-mile-an-hour winds. It totally destroyed my neighbor's newly emerged soybean crop, and it just blew thousands and thousands of tons of topsoil off of their land into mine. And so I called Josh and Rebecca, the producers of Common Ground, and I said, you really need to get here and film this. And so we're standing there on the fence line between my neighbors and mine. I haven't spoke to the neighbors since then. I don't know if they saw the film or not yet, but I'll say this about the neighbors. And when I started no-tilling in 1994, I was, I believe, the first 100% full-time no-tiller in our county. And Burleigh County, North Dakota has about 750,000 cropland acres. And I'm happy to say, fast forward 30 years, and now today, literally 85 to 90% of those 750,000 acres are no-till. So we've removed the tillage off most of those acres. Now, they just haven't gone with as many cover crops and the livestock integration as I have. But, you know, there's an old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, none of my neighbors have ever come up my driveway and asked me to show them what I'm doing. If they did, I'd stop whatever I was doing and I would take them on a tour and discuss the principles and processes. But they have to be willing first. Other than that, they can talk about me all I want. I don't care. I got thick skin. Doesn't bother me.
There was a question in the chat about how long does it take to regenerate the soils? I know it's happening all the time, but you know, some sense of how much happens over what time period?
Yeah, a great question. And I always answer that question that whoever asks it needs to look in the mirror, because the whole, well, the vast majority of the answer to that question, how fast it takes, really depends on that land steward being intentional. Are you adopting the 6 principles? You know, do you have diversity? You know, in the case of arable land, are you putting a cover crop on? Are you adding diversity? If you're able, do you integrate livestock? Because that really jumpstarts things also. With our clients that we consult with, we can see some changes to the soil dynamics, the aggregation, water infiltration, etc., just after one growing season. Usually, though, by the end of 3 years, there's major changes. You really notice the differences in infiltration, aggregation. You're going to start noticing the pollinator predator insects are showing up. You're capturing a lot more solar energy. You can just see it. You can hear it. You can feel it. 3 years is it really isn't that long of a period of time. Now, obviously, it's dependent a bit on your environment. You know, what's your moisture, what's your growing season, etc. But it happens much, much faster than we used to think possible.
Which I think is a good segue into our next section. But I mean, this is good for farmers. It's good for the planet. It's good for our health. It's good for biodiversity and so many other things. Like, why isn't this going faster? Where's the friction, and how can we remove the friction?
Yeah. And you know, it's about the same everywhere as I travel around the world now. Obviously, you get into some countries where a lot smaller landholders, education is an issue. But here in the United States, we have to realize it's driven in large part. The consumer, as I said earlier, drives it with their buying dollar. They wanted a copious supply of cheap food. Well, they got a copious supply, I believe, of food-like substances. I don't think the majority of what is offered today can really be considered food. It has but a fraction of the nutrient content that it once did, and way too many preservatives and processed food. But also realize in the United States, it's driven by the large complex, okay? Farmers will go to where the money is. They farm and ranch to make a profit. They want to do what's right for the landscape. I honestly believe there is no farmer out there who wants to degrade their landscape. But they're going to go to where the profit is. Well, in the United States, that's tied in with the federal farm program, in particular revenue insurance. And, farming and ranching is a capital intensive business. Farmers and ranchers put large amounts of capital at risk every year to put that crop in. Well, the lending institution isn't going to borrow money unless they're in that federal farm program. That's not saying you can't be in there if you go down the regenerative path. You can, but it drives overproduction of certain commodities, corn, wheat, cotton, etc. So that's one reason it's not adopted here. The other thing is just, you look at what farmers and ranchers today, they hear from the chemical industry, the fertilizer dealer, the seed salesman, the implement dealer. No, you got to do it this way, got to do it this way. They're not being shown another way. Okay. Beautiful thing is, once a farmer starts down this path and understands the principles and processes, they're going to be in for the long haul. And the success rate is greater than 90%. It just is. It's working with nature. It's doing it in a way that you can see the difference, hear the difference, feel the difference, and it's more profitable. Work by Dr. Jonathan Lundgren at Dices Foundation showed regenerative farms 78% greater profitability. That's huge. That's huge. Yeah.
Wow. So many threads to follow up on, but there's a question in the chat: can the ag sector transition to regenerative without also major shifts in policy and the balance of power in corporate dominated agri-food system of today? That's an impediment.
Yeah, but it's happening. We see many of our clients that we get transitioning down the regenerative path, their mind shift changes. And then they become entrepreneurs themselves. And they're no longer, what's the old saying? Farmers and ranchers are the only ones who buy retail, sell wholesale, and pay the freight both ways. Well, they're saying they don't want this. In my book, I talk about my favorite saying: let's sign the back of the check, not the front. So they become entrepreneurs and they start marketing directly, which is a good thing. We need to eat more local. We need to know the farmers and ranchers that are providing us with our food. That's a good thing. I'm one that I really believe that we can make change. I know we can. I've seen it all over the world, and there's no excuses. We shouldn't have any excuses. Let's just not even talk about those things. Let's just go do it and make the change. Let's drive the change.
And what you're saying, I think it's an issue, but in spite of that, the market should work in this situation. And it's a matter of educating and kind of facilitating. And that's what your life is right now. That's what you're doing.
Yeah. And Tony, realize that I always hear this: well, we got to help farmers transition. There's this transition period. No, it's not that difficult. It doesn't require, may require a change in some equipment. If you've been tilling and you want to switch to no-till, do like I did. Just sell the tillage equipment and buy a no-till drill. Then you're all bought in. There's no going back because you sold the tillage equipment. You got to shift in mind, force it on yourself. But the transition, what we see and what we're able to do is start guiding farmers and realize they're over applying these synthetics in a lot of cases. So we start cutting them back. We do split trials in a field, half the field the way they've been doing it, half we start the reduction process. We have them keep very accurate records. And what you see is profitability is what we need to be talking about. Farmers are told we need more yield. I'll take profit over yield any day, because profit I can stay in business. Yield I may not stay in business. So we start showing them an increased profit. That gives them the confidence to move it over greater and greater acres. Now you'll say, but Gabe, regeneratively grown and raised products are bringing a premium. Yeah, it's supply and demand. Okay, I'm a capitalist. I'm not embarrassed to say we direct market all of the products that we grow and raise on our farm, and we get a premium price for it. Why? Because I can. okay? And you say, yeah, Gabe, but people can't afford it. Don't tell me that. Go into people's houses and they probably got sugar-laden breakfast cereal when they could be eating nutrient-dense eggs, okay? So let's have that conversation first. But what will happen, Tony, over time, I honestly believe, as more and more go down the regenerative path, I can grow bushel of wheat, bushel of corn, raise a pound of beef at a lower price point than the conventional model, okay? So I believe we're going to actually be able to bring down the price of nutrient-dense food, okay, over time as more and more people go down this path.
Love it. There's a question about biostimulants or biologics. Their role.
Yeah. So I'll address that, and nothing wrong with it. I think there's major advancements being made. I'll never forget when the first mycorrhizal fungi inoculants came out, and I called Dr. Chris Nichols, world-renowned soil scientist, and I told her, this is coming out. I got a company that wants me to trial it on my land. And she said this. She said, Gabe, there's over 175,000 known species of mycorrhizal fungi. What do you suppose the two they put in that jug are the two that you need? The whole point of her that she was saying is, there's more microorganisms in a teaspoon full of healthy soil than there are people on this planet. Okay? Now, I think it's great, the advancements that are being made in biologics, but you have to realize you take that life and apply it to your soil. If you don't have the principles and processes in place, they're not going to thrive and survive. So then all you're doing is substituting an input, right? You're removing some input, but you're adding that as an input. Build the home and habitat. If you want to use biologics, fine, but do a split trial. Make sure that they're providing the benefit to you.
Makes sense. And then what about the role of academic researchers? And there's really two parts to this, I think, because one is research and the other is teaching.
Yep.
And I mean, like a friend of mine who's a farmer in California, he just says, I do whatever UC Davis tells me to do, right? And so it's pretty clear to me we need to get to the UC Davises of the world. But anyway, I mean, the question that's in the chat is the role of academic researchers and which researchers are inspiring for you. And then if you could also talk about the curriculum piece.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to that question there. The research, the majority of research being done today is very siloed. They look at one thing. And Masanabu, in his book, One Straw Revolution, is quoted as saying, that any object seen in isolation from the whole is not the real thing. And I think that's the big problem with research. It needs to be done on an ecological scale for the whole ecosystem. Because if you remove it and do it in a little test plot, I'm on a 22,500 acre ranch out here in Northwest Montana. Those little plots aren't going to matter when you scale it to the size and scale it is here and in this environment. So the research has to be done correctly. It has to be done in combination ecologically. That's one. The education component then is that it needs, I think, universities need to be conducting part of their research out on working farms and ranches. And I've been on a lot of universities, these little plots, little trials. Okay, let's get it out. You can start it there, but then let's take it out, do real research, and then that's where the educational component comes in. Farmers don't want to come and see just a little plot field. They want to see it being applied to their scale. So I think that's very important from an educational standpoint.
And are there researchers that you admire?
All of them, if they're doing research ecologically. I really gravitate to those researchers who understand you have to have the entire ecosystem. I'll just name a few, and there's many, many more, but excuse me, Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, Dr. Jason Roundtree, Dr. Richard Teague, Dr. Fred Provenza, I mentioned Dr. Chris Nichols, and I mean, there's many, many, many more all over the world, but they think they have a whole systems approach. And those are the ones I tend to gravitate to.
I want to switch gears for a second. So there are a lot of impact investors on the call. Advice for us: what do you want us to be doing right now? What's the best way to put our dollars to work? And some of us donate, some of us do market rate investments, some of us do catalytic investments where we're doing things that don't make as much money but are meant to crowd in capital. What should we be doing right now?
Yeah. And what's that great question? Thanks for asking. What I believe is really needed has to revolve around education. Too many investors that I get emails, calls almost on a daily basis from investors, and they want to invent or discover something, okay, that will magically, pixie dust can change it. No, we got to educate as to the principles and processes. And then the other thing that's really needed, we got to stop the greenwashing. Cannot just have companies, organizations claiming they're regenerative when they're really not. And so there may be some, in some countries, there's definitely need for capital to help people get the no-till drills, equipment needed to move down this regenerative path, if it's in context, okay? But I'll tell you what, this change is not going to come from a GMO seed, okay, for instance. That isn't going to save the world and make us regenerative. It has to come about through natural means. How do we capture more solar energy, the biodiversity? There's real change that's needed. I was over in England last week, and we were looking at Wild Farmed is a company that's creating some waves over there where they're growing polyculture cash crops. There's some technology that's needed there for harvesting and separating the seed, okay? But we know we can grow more biomass, get more overall production while pulling carbon out of the atmosphere if we grow these diverse polyculture cash crops, okay? So the technology like that is needed. I would say the best advice I can give is should invest with an ecological whole ecosystem focus, okay? How are we going to drive meaningful change on the landscape? Because if you want to reverse climate change, which it can be done, we got to cover the earth with a diverse array of growing plants. Nothing will do that better than a perennial polyculture system and being grazed by livestock. Hands down, that's how we're going to move more carbon out of the atmosphere.
In the book, you mentioned transition capital, and then you were saying, this transition isn't that big a deal. I don't know if your thinking's evolved, or does capital still need to flow to that transition stage?
It does, and realize I'm speaking more United States here because that's where I spend the majority of my time. In the United States, farming is a very capital intensive business. As I said, I don't know the exact statistic. I'm sure somebody does out there, but I guarantee it's 85+% of farmers borrow significant amount of capital and to put the crop in each year. So it's very, they're fearful that making that transition will put them at risk. I also think we need to change the actuary tables because we're proving that these healthier soils, less risk of losing a crop to flooding, less risk of pests, etc. We need to change insurance rates, etc. That way and reward Also, interest rates on operating capital reward those who are going down this path. But in saying that, I still don't believe, because I've seen it happen, I don't believe it's a big problem. I think people are using that as an excuse to not move down and transition to regenerative.
Gabe, are there any questions you want to ask the impact investors or the researchers on the call?
Wow. Okay, the one I would ask goes back to my question, why invest in a silver bullet? These principles and processes have evolved over eons of time. Why not focus on them? Because they're time-tested, proven ecological principles, and then instead we're seeing a lot, and forgive me if somebody's on this call who's invested in it, but there's a lot of people investing in hydroponics, okay? We need to do more work with really figuring out the nutrient density of foods. And by that, I don't just mean, proteins, carbohydrates, fats. I'm talking about these phytochemical compounds. Take the work of Dr. Stefan Van Vliet, used a mass spectrometer. He can identify over 2,500 different phytochemical compounds. And what we're finding is that the more diversity in an ecosystem, diversity of plants, animals, insects, that's driving the diversity of these phytochemical compounds in the soil microorganisms, then in the plants, then in the animals, moving to people. We have to get back to the point where we're using food as preventative health. This healthcare system is just ridiculous. It's all about treatment. It should be on prevention, and food should be at the forefront. So I guess what I would ask is why so many investors appear to me, and I may be all wrong, fixated on this silver bullet to reverse climate change when the answer is right before us. It's the principles and processes. Who
I'll
wants
answer
to take that
Gabe.
one on?
I'll answer that, Gabe, is because they haven't read your book yet.
Okay. Well, and that book's a little
it's
outdated.
Ignorance.
Pardon me?
It's ignorance, right?
Well, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
I don't blame my neighbors for not going down this path. They haven't been educated to it, which is kind of ironic, talking about the 3 years of hail and the year of drought. There was one of my neighbors received 3 of those 4 disasters. Several of them received 2 of the 4, but I was the only one that got hit all 4 years. So I think it was divine intervention.
We're right at the top of the hour. And Gabe, maybe a final word from you on this movement or anything else you want to say. And then Dipti, I don't know if you want to close this out, but I truly just want to thank you and everybody on this call, because it's so obvious, it's so important, and the momentum's growing, and it's just so exciting.
Yeah, and realize, I closed out my book with the story about the lady from Detroit who was trying to feed children in that impoverished community. And I challenge people, just make a difference. Never, ever underestimate the power of your voice and the power of you as an individual to make a difference. Doesn't matter if it's only in your family, in your school system, in your community. That's huge. If we all just really try. I mean, look at Ryland, my friend Ryland there, the difference that him and Finian have had with Kiss the Ground and Common Ground, and the trilogy is being filmed as we speak, right? The 3rd movie, and look at the millions upon millions of people that's impacted, and we can all make a difference, and that's what it's going to take.
Wow. Thank you. Any final words, Ryland? I want to make sure I give you a second on the.
I'm just I'm I can't believe I've been moved by this mission for 12 years now, and I'm just as excited and feel like an eager beaver little kid in a candy store, hearing this conversation and feeling it all over my body. And it's just like the regeneration is the good news. Get involved. do something, be the change you wish to see. Yeah, I mean, I'm not only doing it with Kiss the Ground, but I'm also living in Texas and helping build a regenerative ranch and farm here with my sister. So yeah, take it on. This is the thing to give our lives to, and yeah, let's jump in wholeheartedly.
Amazing. Thank you. Koen, anything from you? You're leading so much of the regen ag work here at Toniic. I want to give you space.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, obviously, to have a book club here. We've done a mini version on nutrient density a while back with Ann Bickley and David Montgomery, who obviously also did the research on products grown by Gabe. So just comes full circle. We've done 2.5 years, 3.5 years of regen working groups now, and so happy to see a larger audience here and a larger audience of Toniic members. And I've really seen a change. 10 plus years I joined Toniic and I was the annoying one talking about soil to many people, and now we have a full-on working group and 60 plus people on this call. So I'm just happy. And for anybody joining Toniic members, tomorrow we have our regen one and we're going to discuss, no shock, palm oil. So if you're interested in the good, the bad and ugly, I'm a member, so please join that if you're interested. And thank you so much.
One last thing, which is just Gabe, any if they're going to continue on with the book club, anybody that you would want to point to, you know, I've been pointing to you. Anybody that you want to point to as far as another book that could be an amazing continuation of education. I know I was thinking of.
Well, he just mentioned David Montgomery there. The book "What Your Food Ate" is really a good one. That or the book by Mark Schatzker, The Dorito Effect. You know, that's a really good book also. Yeah. And for all the investors out there, I hope you and philanthropists, the book Toxic Charity is pretty good also.
Amazing. I feel like Tony and I are going to have more friends at our book club, which makes us extremely excited. One thing before we go is it'd be great to take a photo of everyone. Let us remember this moment of where we continued and started the journey. So I'm going to do a screenshot and let me see if this works. And I'll do a couple just to get everyone. So I'll try and say 1, 2, 3, go. So let me see if I can do this properly. This feels like the harder part of the call. All right. All right.
While we're waiting, another great book is Nourishment by Fred Parenza. Yeah, that's a really amazing book that I highly recommend.
All right, amazing.
And I'm going to add Entangled Life by Melvin Sheldrake.
Ooh, reading that now. Amazing.
Bobby,
right.
Great to see you.
I'm listening to that now. You too, darling. Thank you, Gabe. That was truly amazing. Thank you, everyone, for coordinating this. Thank you, Kiss the Ground. Thank you, Toniic.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Bobby.
Appreciate all of you. Thanks for making this happen. Bye.
Yeah, and the whole team.